In 1946, a man could sit down to a breakfast that today would set off alarms in 3 different government agencies. The plate that powered steelworkers, miners, and farmhands was built on foods that have since been outlawed, residue-tested off the shelf, or quietly made illegal to serve. Number 10. Coffee with raw, unpasteurized cream. In 1946, the first thing on the table was coffee, but it's what went into it that would raise eyebrows now. Families skimmed the thick cream off the top of a glass bottle of raw, unpasteurized milk delivered that morning and stirred it straight into the cup. That cream carried fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K2, plus living enzymes and bacteria that the modern carton has been heated to destroy. A working man might take 3 cups before dawn, each one a small dose of dense, usable fat to start a 12-hour shift. The cream itself is now effectively contraband across most of the country. In 1987, the FDA banned the interstate sale of raw milk, and a patchwork of state laws criminalized it outright in many places. The cup survived. The raw cream that made it breakfast did not. Number 9. Beef heart hash. Long before anyone sold nose to tail as a wellness trend, the cheapest organ at the butcher started the day as hash. Beef heart, dense, lean muscle, was diced with cold potatoes and onions, browned hard in a skillet, and topped with a fried egg. Ounce for ounce, it is one of the richest natural sources of CoQ10 on Earth, loaded with B12, iron, zinc, and high-quality protein, and it cost a fraction of steak. For a man about to spend the morning swinging a hammer, it was fuel and medicine in one pan. No statute ever outlawed heart. What erased it was the rise of factory farming, the supermarket's preference for tidy, boneless cuts, and a post-war squeamishness about anything that looked like an organ. By the 1980s, organ meat consumption had collapsed to a sliver of its 1940s level, and the breakfast hash went with it. Number 8. Deviled kidneys on toast. Deviled kidneys were a serious man's breakfast. Lamb or veal kidneys, trimmed, peppered hot with mustard and cayenne, seared in butter, and piled onto toast to soak up the juices. They delivered an enormous hit of B12, selenium, riboflavin, and iron in a few bites, the kind of micronutrient density no boxed cereal has ever approached. In farm kitchens and boarding houses, it was ordinary, prized for being cheap and powerful at once. Nothing banned the kidney, but everything around it changed. Mass production routed organ meats away from the breakfast table and into pet food and processing. Modern squeamishness did the rest, and the dish quietly disappeared from American menus within a generation. The irony is that the nutrients it delivered, particularly bioavailable iron and B12, are now among the most commonly diagnosed deficiencies in the developed world. Number 7. Apple butter from lead arsenate orchards. A jar of dark, slow-cooked apple butter sat on nearly every 1940s breakfast table, spread thick on biscuits and cornbread. The apples it was made from, though, carry a hidden history. For the first half of the century, American orchards were sprayed heavily with lead arsenate, a pesticide that left arsenic and lead residues on the fruit. Residues that touched off some of the earliest food safety scandals in the country. Nobody at the breakfast table knew. After the war, DDT displaced lead arsenate in the orchards, and the EPA formally canceled the last food crop uses of arsenical pesticides by the late 1980s. The apple butter itself was never the villain. The chemistry sprayed onto the fruit was. It's a reminder that banned doesn't always mean the food. Sometimes it means the invisible thing the food was grown in. Number 6. Home-colored yellow margarine. Here is a breakfast spread that was, for decades, literally restricted by law. Through the 1940s, federal taxes and state statutes made it illegal or prohibitively expensive to sell margarine already colored yellow, to shield the dairy industry from a cheaper butter rival. So margarine arrived white, like lard, with a small capsule of dye the housewife kneaded in by hand at the kitchen table before breakfast. Butter ruled the morning toast partly because its competitor had been deliberately handicapped. When the Federal Margarine Act repealed those color restrictions in 1950, the floodgates opened, and margarine, soon loaded with the partially hydrogenated oils that would later be banned themselves, began shoving real butter off the American plate. A few states held their bans even longer. Wisconsin outlawed the sale of colored margarine until 1967. The banned spread eventually won. Number 5. nitrate-cured country ham, and breakfast bacon. The smell that defined a 1940s morning was salt-cured pork hitting a hot pan. Country ham and thick-cut bacon, preserved with salt and curing nitrites, were breakfast protein and breakfast fat at once, anchoring the plate in farm and mill kitchens alike. The men eating it walked off the calories before noon. The hard turn came in 2015 when the International Agency for Research on Cancer classified processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens, citing evidence that eating just 50 grams a day, about 2 slices of bacon, raises colorectal cancer risk by roughly 18%. Warning labels and dietary guidelines followed, and the classification drew no line between a slow, traditional dry cure and a fast chemical injection. The breakfast meat that fed a generation of laborers was filed on paper into the same category as tobacco smoke. Number 4. The half-dozen egg breakfast. In 1946, 3, 4, even 6 eggs fried in bacon grease was an unremarkable breakfast for a working man, and his doctor said nothing. Eggs were a near-perfect food, complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids, choline, and fat-soluble vitamins concentrated in the yolk. Then came the war on cholesterol. The American Heart Association's 1968 recommendation, hardened into the 1970s guidelines, capped dietary cholesterol at 300 milligrams a day. A single large egg holds about 186, so a 3-egg breakfast blew past the limit before the bacon even landed. Per capita egg consumption fell sharply, and the yolk stayed a villain for nearly 50 years. Then, in a quiet reversal, the 2015 dietary guidelines removed the cholesterol cap entirely, conceding it was never a nutrient of real concern. The eggs were finally cleared, but the breakfast had already been broken. Number 3. Creamed sweetbreads on toast. Sweetbreads, the thymus and pancreas glands of a calf, were once both a delicacy and a breakfast staple, gently poached, sliced, bound in a cream sauce, and spooned over toast. They were soft, rich, and astonishingly nutrient-dense, carrying B vitamins, protein, and minerals in a form the body absorbs easily. A boarding house cook in 1946 could buy them cheap and turn out a luxurious-looking plate for pennies. 2 forces removed them. First, the same post-war collapse in organ meat eating that took heart and kidney off the table. Second, decades later, the mad cow era brought new restrictions on certain cattle glands and tissues entering the food supply, narrowing what could legally be sold and scaring buyers off the rest. What had been an everyday morning dish became an obscure restaurant rarity most Americans have never tasted or even heard of. Number 2, lard in the bacon grease tin. Every item so far was cooked in the same thing, rendered animal fat. A tin of saved bacon grease sat on the back of the 1940s stove, refilled each morning, and a tub of lard stood beside it for the biscuits and the fried mush. These fats were stable under high heat, flavorful, and, from pasture-raised animals, genuinely rich in monounsaturated fat and vitamin D. Then the American Heart Association's saturated fat warnings of the 1960s and the federal dietary goals that followed in 1977 branded them dangerous and drove them out of the kitchen. They were replaced by partially hydrogenated vegetable oils sold as the heart-healthy choice. The punchline arrived decades later. Those replacement oils were the ones the FDA actually banned, with full compliance forced by 2018, while the animal fats they displaced were never illegal at all. Number 1. Scrambled brains and eggs. And the most extreme breakfast on this list is the one that is now genuinely against the law. Scrambled calf brains and eggs was a real common morning dish across the rural South and in immigrant kitchens. Brains parboiled, then folded into eggs and scrambled soft in butter, served on toast. Brain tissue is among the richest natural sources of omega-3 fats, phospholipids, and the very cholesterol the body uses to build its own nervous system, and for a working family, nothing was wasted. Then the mad cow disease scare changed everything. In 2004, responding to BSE, the USDA designated the brain and spinal cord of older cattle as specified risk materials and prohibited them from the human food supply outright. The breakfast that once started a laborer's day is, for beef, now illegal to serve in America. The clearest case on this entire list of a powerful food legislated straight off the plate.